بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصافات صفا فالزاجرات زجرا فالتاليات ذكرا إن إلهكم لواحد رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما ورب المشارق.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah, we'll continue with Surah As-Saffat and with verses number 75 from Surah As-Saffat. But before we continue, because of also the change of the time for this week, inshallah, right after Salatul Fajr and other things, I just want to remind myself and everyone. One of the things that I just came across oneself, especially at this time. It's very early in the morning. And Fajr, as we know, this is the earliest times of Fajr these days. Remember the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when hadith of Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, when the Prophet ﷺ شُغِلَ عَنْهُمْ لَيْلًا. It was for Salatul Isha. And he was busy that night ﷺ, so he did not come out for the people for Salatul Isha. So the people in the masjid, and there was Rijal and Nisa and Subyan, men, women, children. نام النساء والصبيان, they slept, and the men slept. ثم استيقظنا, then we woke up, then we slept, and then we woke up. And it was well known in the Arab, and this is the Sunnah, is to sleep right after Isha. Not just that, it was a big struggle for them to wait for Salatul Isha. That's why when the Prophet ﷺ, he said that أثقل الصلاة على المنافقين صلاة الفجر والعشاء ولو يعلموا ما فيهما لا أتوهما ولو حبوا. That the heaviest two salah on the munafiqeen, Fajr and Isha. And if they know what's in it of the reward, they would come to it even if they have to crawl on the ground. Because once Maghrib time comes, the whole day is a day of work, and people would struggle with themselves to wait till Salatul Isha. That's why the Prophet ﷺ, he would dislike sleeping after Maghrib because they're most likely to miss Salatul Isha. وَيَكْرَهُ الْكَلَامِ بَعْدَهَا. And he would dislike speaking after Salatul Isha unless it's sitting with the family, seeking knowledge, things like that. There has to be a reason why a person is awake after Salatul Isha. So in that particular incident, when he came very late to them, والسلام, almost to the middle of the night, and he said, ليس أو لا أعلم أحدا من أهل الأرض ينتظر الصلاة غيركم. I don't know anyone on the face of earth waiting for the salah other than you. You're the only ones on the face of earth today making salah. At this moment, making salah. And he said this was in the early stages of Islam. Of course, no more believers that are establishing the salah at this time. So sometimes when it's very early like this, how many people would be at this time seeking ilm or seeking knowledge or sitting making dhikr? Alhamdulillah, the khair in the ummah is so much, alhamdulillah. And this is not a thing for a person to like himself. It's the total opposite. A person, he only seeks the forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but to have the himma and the zeal to establish the ibadah, it doesn't matter whether it's summertime or winter time or whatever there is. إن الصلاة كانت على المؤمنين كتابا موقوتا. And without mujahada, there is no deen is established. So therefore, there has to be the struggle with oneself. وأن العبودية قامت على ساق المجاهدة. As Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah said, العبودية to Allah, servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is established on the saq, on the basis of al-mujahada. And the saq is the shin. Without the shin, a person is not able to stand. So on the mujahada. So this is with the ibadah. The other thing is the issue of seeking knowledge, and we have to be consistent in what we studied in adab al-talab, and the manners and the etiquettes of seeking knowledge. And the first point, if you remember, that was studied in the book Hilya Talib al-Ilm and others, is that al-ilmu ibadah. Talab al-ilmi ibadah. Seeking knowledge is ibadah. Is ibadah, that means it requires ikhlas, following the way the Prophet ﷺ. And if a person is seeking knowledge not as a ibadah, he can cause so much corruption to the ummah. And that's why al-ilm is not ma'rifah, is not knowledge in the sense of information. So it requires the individual. The person that's seeking the knowledge is that he has to be someone that is acting upon the knowledge that he learned. So the alim is not the one that has the degrees. And never degrees was a sign of ilm, ever. And the ulama, they established this. Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah even said, al-wilaya, la tunassibu alima. If someone is given the position of the mufti, given the position of this, does not make him necessarily a alim, because this, with the worldly means, can be given in certain times, in certain situations, to someone that has not even smelled ilm. It's valid to happen. So what is the alim? Is the one that has the knowledge, yes, but the one that fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. So when we're seeking knowledge, this is something that should not escape from ourselves, that this is an act of ibadah. And if we seek knowledge and acquire knowledge, if the hearts are corrupted, this is corruption to the ummah, not just to oneself, but also for a person. When he has knowledge, he has to spread the knowledge. So then that causes corruption even to others. That's why this is the worst of the individuals, and this is one of the people that that they will be the first to be thrown into the hellfire, as the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. So without taking too much of the time, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah in Miftah Dar al-Sa'ada, in his book Miftah Dar al-Sa'ada, he mentioned that من طلب العلم ليحيا به الإسلام، من طلب العلم ليحيا به الإسلام فهو مع الصديقين ودرجته بعد درجة النبوة. Whoever seeks knowledge ليحيا به الإسلام, for the deen of Islam to be revived by this knowledge that he's seeking. So he's seeking knowledge with that intention, for the deen of Islam to be revived. And the life of the deen is with ilm. The deen is baqin ila yawm al-qiyamah. The deen is established to the day of judgment. No one will change or deviate anything from the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it requires carriers of this deen, carriers of this ilm. And the intention, al-ikhlas, sincerity, is a pillar, is a condition for anything, for it to be good and to be blessed. So someone seeking knowledge to get a degree, this is the easiest thing to be achieved. But that's not what is meant by ilm. Yes, it's important, it's good to help the person to organize himself and to organize the way that he seeks knowledge. Also for people to trust one another, but it's the individual himself. So, and this is something that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, and this is the one of the secrets, not secret, it's very well clear, but this is what you cannot make analogy between talabul ilm shar'i and talab ilm ad-dunya. There's no way that they're going to be the same. So when people try their best to make it look the same, with the same logistics around it, and it doesn't work this way. Right? You can get the highest level of degrees, but it doesn't make you an expert in this, unless the person himself is a follower of what he teaches. So when talab al-ilm yahya bi al-Islam, and this is a great intention, especially what we witness in our lifetime, for the deen of Islam to be revived. Right? Then he is min as-siddiqeen, he's from the siddiqeen, which is the level wa darajatuhu, and his level right after the level of prophethood. Because the level of prophethood, no one can reach that. So right after the level of prophethood, as-siddiqeen. أولئك الذين أنعم الله عليهم من النبيين والصديقين والشهداء والصالحين. The siddiqeen comes right after the prophethood, after the prophets, but with their intention. And this is where they say the ulama are from the level of as-siddiqeen. Who are the ulama? The ulama, not the ones that have knowledge. Again, those who have the knowledge and they apply the knowledge according to the way the Prophet ﷺ. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us sincerity, ikhlas, and never to, we need to be always reminded of these types of meanings. So I'm having this introduction, inshallah, be patient, inshallah, whatever time we finish, it's okay, inshallah. Whoever wants to leave, they can leave, inshallah, but we won't take too long, inshallah. So ayah number 75 from Surah As-Saffat. يقول الله عز وجل: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولقد نادانا نوح فلنعم المجيبون ونجيناه وأهله من الكرب العظيم وجعلنا ذريته هم الباقين وتركنا عليه في الآخرين سلام على نوح في العالمين إنا كذلك نجزي المحسنين إنه من عبادنا المؤمنين ثم أغرقنا الآخرين. Is it okay to recite the Quran like this in the lectures, or just to say it without tajweed, or without even giving it a taghanni, without giving it a tone? Because some brothers, they ask this, and you would might see some of the statements of the ulama saying that this is even bid'ah to say this in lectures or in khutab. If an ayah is being mentioned as an istishhad, right, as the ulama they say, if someone is given a speech and he's bringing an evidence as a verse, then it's to be said like this, without making it with taghanni, like some would say this. And even though the matter is easy, after all, if someone does this, it doesn't mean that he's doing something wrong or anything. But this is when, with the tahqiq, as the ulama they say, when you look into the evidences and the ways, the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, would not recite the Quran with a tone when it's in the subject of al-istishhad, bringing an evidence, an ayah verse mentioned in a khutbah or a dars. But if there is Quran is recited, then it's different. So it's been, for example, the ways of the ulama, if there's dars of tafseer, when they start with the ayat that they're going to make the tafsir of 2, 3 verses, whatever, it's to be recited like you would recite the Quran, because now it's recitation of the Quran, not bringing it as an evidence in a subject. So, and after all of this, if it happens, it's still the matter is easy, since a person would say, but we have been commanded that if the Quran is recited, وَرَتَّلْنَاهُ تَرْتِيلًا, to make the tartil of it. So the matter is an easy one, not to be a dispute in this subject. So he says here, going through the tafsir of Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, وَلَقَدْ نَادَانَا نُوحٌ فَلَنِعْمَ الْمُجِيبُونَ. Indeed, Nuh alayhi salam, he invoked us, and we are the best of those who answer. The verses before, amazing verses about the day of judgment, and the people of Jannah and the people of the Hellfire, and the nations before, and the ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the face of earth. So, as always repeated, for us to benefit from the Quran, you have to go back to where before you start the tafsir of the verses, you have to carry in your heart the verses before. So otherwise a person would lack the effect of these verses. So when we look into the previous verses, so assuming that we are aware of that and we have this present in our hearts, and right before that, وَلَقَدْ ضَلَّ قَبْلَهُمْ أَكْثَرُ الْأَوَّلِينَ, after what's going to be in Darul Jaza, in the Day of Judgment, is mentioned in details, and how the amal is, it's all about al-amal and the actions. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the worst thing that can happen to the human beings, the most frequent reason for their deviation from the truth. إِنَّهُمْ أَلْفَوْا آبَاءَهُمْ ضَالِّينَ فَهُمْ عَلَى آثَارِهِمْ يُهْرَعُونَ. Previously in verse number 69 or so, that it happened. And if you remember the word أَلْفَوْا, right? إِنَّهُمْ أَلْفَوْا آبَاءَهُم. It happened, وَجَدُوا, without any plan for it. Someone was created, someone was born, and he raised, and all of a sudden he finds himself in that environment. He did not plan for him to be in that era, or this time, or whatever. So they found themselves, they found their fathers are dhalin. It happened that their parents and their forefathers and their ancestors were deviated, disbelievers. So what happened? فَهُمْ عَلَى آثَارِهِمْ يُهْرَعُونَ. So they are on their footsteps, not just following yuhra'un, fast, diligently, following the footsteps of their ancestors, without thinking, without using what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them, which is their aql and their reason, without listening to the messengers, without listening to the books. And this is the most common cause for deviation for humanity. And the Quran mentioned that many, many times. And this is one of the things that needs to be instigated in the hearts of each and every one of us. Be careful, because this is something that can divert the person away from the haqq. In the ultimate sense, kufr and iman, and also in the subject of the deen. You have ilm, Quran and sunnah, but then the parents, the forefathers, isn't it valid to be not valid in the correct sense, but it can be from the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that a person found himself. ألفى نفسه, he found himself in an environment where there's so much shirk and bid'ah and so on. So what happened? He's going to continue to be in that path. Well, what's the difference between that attitude and the type of the heart like this and the hearts of the disbelievers? So there has to be this personal decision that a person, aqdul iman, it's an individual thing. That a person would have this covenant of al-iman to follow the wahy from Allah. So, وَلَقَدْ ضَلَّ قَبْلَهُمْ أَكْثَرُ الْأَوَّلِينَ. Most of the awwaleen, most of the first, the earlier generations have been deviated. You know, and the less in numbers are those who are guided. This is the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth. وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا فِيهِمْ مُنذِرِينَ. We sent unto them munzirin, warners. فَانظُرْ كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الْمُنذَرِينَ. So then look at the outcome of the munzirin. What happened to those who were warned? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punished them. And this is every single human being can understand that. And this, if you heard last night when Sheikh Uthman was saying this about the concept was very, very obvious and very straightforward. Right? If you're warned about something, then if the punishment comes, you are the one to be blamed because the punishment was made very clear. So then, after that is mentioned, so that should be well established in the heart, then it's by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then He mentioned examples from the nations before to show that this sunnah is a continuous one. So, O people of Quraysh, don't think that you're something unique or something different in your time. The people of today, it's the same thing. Nothing changed. So that's why to benefit from these verses. So Imam al-Sa'di rahimahullah, he said, ثم ذكر نموذجا من عواقب الأمم المكذبين. The middle of the page of 1425. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned نموذجا, and we talked about a namudaj, an example. Al-unmudaj or namudaj also, it's used for a prototype when you make something and then you make the like of it. So example of from the awaqib, from the aqiba, from the outcome of the the nations that denied the truth. So he says, وَلَقَدْ نَادَانَا نُوحٌ فَلَنِعْمَ الْمُجِيبُ. يخبر تعالى. Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, he says, يخبر تعالى عن عبده ورسوله نوح عليه السلام. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is informing about his abd and his rasul, Nuh alayhi salam, أول الرسل, the first of the messengers. The first of the prophets is Nabi Adam alayhi salam. But the first of the messengers that was wahy revealed to them to convey it to the people was Nuh alayhi salam. أول الرسل. أنه لما دعا قومه إلى الله. When he called his people to Allah, تلك المدة الطويلة, this long time, ألف سنة إلا 50 عام, 1000 years minus 50. فلم يزدهم دعاؤه إلا فرار. He's mentioning some of the words in Surah Nuh, that his dua, his invitation to his people did not increase them anything but fleeing away from him. It's supposed to be the total opposite, but fleeing away from him. أنه نادى ربه, that he called, invoked his Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فقال, what is nadana? Nadana, he called upon us. And nida is to call someone. And this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Nuh alayhi salam called upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is the nida? The nida is not mentioned here. What did he say is not mentioned in this verse. But it's mentioned in other verses in the Quran. That's why the Quran explains itself. So as he quote the verse in Surah Nuh, رَبِّ لَا تَذَرْ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ دَيَّارٍ. This is the invocation, this is the dua for the aqibah. Because he mentioned now this is the examples of the punishment, not the examples of the da'wah itself. So the focus here is about the punishment, what happened to the nations before. When he said in Surah Nuh, رَبِّ لَا تَذَرْ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ دَيَّارٍ. O Allah, O my Lord, do not leave on the face of earth any one of the disbelievers. So al-ayah. وقال, and he also said, رَبِّ انصُرْنِي عَلى الْقَوْمِ الْمُفْسِدِينَ. O Allah, make me victorious over the mufsidin. But as even you see here down, this is the dua of Lut alayhi salam, but the dua of Nuh alayhi salam in Surah Al-Mu'minun, قال رَبِّ انصُرْنِي بِمَا كَذَّبُونَ. My Lord, انصرني, help me, بِمَا كَذَّبُونَ, because of what they denied the truth. So, فَاسْتَجَابَ اللَّهُ لَهُ. Actually, this is one Surah Al-Anbiya, the ayah that, but this is like Al-Karb is mentioned in it, which is the next verse. This verse is 67, the next one. 76, right? 76 in Surah Al-Anbiya has also Al-Karb that Nuh alayhi salam he mentioned, Surah Al-Anbiya. So, فاستجاب الله له. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted the dua of Nuh alayhi salam ومدح تعالى نفسه, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised himself by saying فلنعم المجيبون. فلنعم المجيبون, what a great mujibun, those who accept the dua. And ni'ma is uslub madh, is a statement of praise. So فلنعم المجيبون, and that's more of course powerful than to say we accept it. We are the best of those who accept the dua. وَلَقَدْ نَادَانَا نُوحٌ فَلَنِعْمَ الْمُجِيبُونَ. And this is in general at all times, not just to Nuh alayhi salam, to everyone. فَلَنِعْمَ الْمُجِيبُونَ, those who would respond to the dua. لِدُعَاءِ الدَّاعِينَ, for the dua of those who make dua. وَسَمَاعِ تَبَتُّلِهِمْ. He says here, وَسَمَاعَ, and listening to their tabattul. التبتل وتبتل إليه تبتيلا is the ibadah that with it is inqita', is detaching oneself from the entire world and making the ibadah. So having this seclusion while the person is making the ibadah. So while they're making the dua, they're not thinking about any other means whatsoever except what they are engaged in, which is the dua. وَسَمَاعِ تَبَتُّلِهِمْ وَتَضَرُّعِهِمْ. التضرع is the intensity of the dua, is the level of the dua that is like a person is making dua to be saved from imminent death, for example. أجابه إجابة, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted, responded to his dua, إجابة طابقت ما سأل. طابقت, and mutabaqa is when something goes on top of something exactly. So the ijaba, the acceptance, the response of the dua was exactly as he asked. Because the acceptance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can take one of three forms, as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ said. Either to accept the dua as the person asked, or to keep it for the person in the day of judgment, which is in rewards and better than what he asked for, or to push away harm from him equal to the dua that he said. And also some of the time the dua is accepted and more. Person asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something, he gets it and more. That's by the mercy of Allah. But the dua of Nuh alayhi salam, since every prophet was given a da'wah that is accepted, major da'wah for him, as the hadith of al-shafa'ah, and the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, وَخَبَّأْتُ دَعْوَتِي لِأُمَّتِي شَفَاعَةً يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. And I خَبَّأْتُ hidden. That means I kept my da'wah for my ummah in the day of judgment. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam did not make the dua upon the ummah in this life. He kept it in the hereafter. And definitely this is what is best for the ummah. So this ummah, the way that it's treated in this life is by the ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the day of judgment, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encompasses this ummah. So anyway here, so أجابه إجابة طابقت ما سأل. He made the dua, he got the acceptance exactly of what he asked. When he says, as is mentioned in Surah Nuh, he says نجاه وأهله من الكرب العظيم ونجيناه وأهله من الكرب العظيم ولقد نادانا نوح فاستجبنا له فنجيناه وأهله من الكرب العظيم. This is also verse number 76 in Surah Al-Anbiya. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved him and his family from the major karb. وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ. And najah is to be saved. And if you remember, al-istinja, right, has resemblance, because al-najwa, qat' al-najwa is when something is detached and something higher. So al-najah is when someone is saved. That means he's removed from the punishment, whether after the punishment or before the punishment. So sometimes a person is already being in harm and then he's saved. And someone, the harm did not come and he's saved before the harm comes. So وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ وَأَهْلَهُ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved Nuh alayhi salam and his people before the punishment came. مِنَ الْكَرْبِ الْعَظِيمِ, from the major karb. And al-karb, he does not mention here that the al-karb is, as they call it, shiddatu al-gham, the intensity of huzn and gham. They mention the huzn and the gham, the grief and the worries and the stress and the sadness, all types of mental, non-physical meanings of bad and misery and sadness and concern and worries. All of that is in al-karb. And al-karb, something heavy, something intense, whether it refers to a special knot that they would have when they tie their belongings or other things. So this is وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْكَرْبِ الْعَظِيمِ نَجَّاهُ وَأَهْلَهُ. And al-Ahl here, the people of Nuh and the family of Nuh, except, as it's mentioned in Surah Hud, his son. And as the verses, if you remember, that Nuh alayhi salam, when he said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِنَّ بِنِي مِنْ أَهْلِ وَإِنَّ وَعْدَكَ الْحَقِّ. My son is from my ahl, from my family, and your promise is the truth. قال نوح إنه ليس من أهلك إنه عمل غير صالح. That Nuh, he is not from your ahl, because he was a disbeliever. He is عمل غير صالح. He is non-righteous action. And in some of the قراءات إنه عمل غير صالح. He did act not upon righteousness. So this is also to make us understand the meaning of al-ahl. Right? The ahl in this life, yes. If they are on different religions, it's only during this life. After this life, there's no relationship whatsoever, as it's mentioned in previous verses also. نجاه أهله من الكرب العظيم وأغرق جميع الكافرين. And he drowned all of the disbelievers. وأبقى نسله وذريته متسلسلين. So ونجيناه وأهله من الكرب العظيم, and it proves that al-ahl is not just the family physically, but those who are upon the way, those who are upon the religion. من الكرب العظيم, from the major karb. وجعلنا ذريته هم الباقين. We made his ذرية, his offsprings, to be al-baqin, those who stay. Because everyone on the face of earth, which is the correct opinion, after the tufan, after the flood, all of the people on the face of earth died. And only the people that were carried with Nuh alayhi salam, they are the only ones that are alive on the face of earth. They were the only ones saved, none else. So أغرق جميع الكافرين وأبقى نسله, and only the nasl. Nasl is the ذرية, is the offsprings of Nuh alayhi salam وذريته متسلسلين, chain. This is the only chains of the human beings, and that's why in the Tafseer they talk about Yafith and Sam and like this. He's the father of the Arabs, he's the father of the Romans, he's the father of the different ajnas, or the different kinds of the races of the human beings. But this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. He says, فَجَمِيعُ النَّاسِ مِنْ ذُرِّيَّةِ نُوحَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ. All of the people that are present today are from the lineage of Nuh alayhi السلام. وَجَعَلَ لَهُ ثَنَاءً حَسَنًا. And he made for him ثَنَاءً حَسَنًا, a good ثناء, a good praise, مُسْتَمِرًا إِلَى وَقْتِ الْآخِرِينَ, that is continuous till the end of times. So again, all of us from Adam alayhi السلام, so no one should have fakhr or feel that he's superior over others. Black over white, white over black, whatever there is. And to add to this more, even all of us are from the lineage of the first messenger, Nuh alayhi salam. So this is a great honor, but only for the believers, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the example of his immediate son, so that we don't have to go far. His immediate son and the love that he had towards his son, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed for his son to be a disbeliever. So if a person disbelieves, there's no karama, there's no honor for him. So this is what وَجَعَلْنَا ذُرِّيَّتَهُ هُمُ الْبَاقِينَ. His lineage are the ones, his offsprings are the ones that stayed. وَتَرَكْنَا عَلَيْهِ فِي الْآخِرِينَ. وَتَرَكْنَا عَلَيْهِ فِي الْآخِرِينَ. This is what is meant by وَجَعَلْنَا لَهُ ثَنَاءً حَسَنًا. We تركنا, الترك is to leave something. عليه في الآخرين, in the last, in the later generations. That means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had Nuh alayhi salam to be praised and to be present in the later generations with being praised, and that's why every nation they praise Nuh alayhi salam is honored among them. So that's why Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he says وَتَرَكْنَا عَلَيْهِ فِي الْآخِرِينَ, says يُذْكَرُ بِخَيْرٍ. Nuh alayhi salam is always mentioned with khayr, with goodness. وَتَرَكْنَا عَلَيْهِ فِي الْآخِرِينَ فَجَمِيعُ النَّاسِ وَجَعَلَ لَهُ ثَنَاءً حَسَنًا مُسْتَمِرًا. It's continuous ثناء and praise till the time of the last. And that is وَذَلِكَ لِأَنَّهُ مُحْسِنٌ فِي عِبَادَةِ الْخَالِقِ. And that is because he is muhsin, has the level of al-ihsan, goodness, in worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala al-Khaliq. Muhsinun il khalq. Muhsinun, having the goodness to the khalq. Even though most of his people, they had enmity towards him, but he was the best towards them, because he wanted what is best for them to be saved from the punishment of Allah. And he had the patience and the struggle with his people for 950 years, calling them, and never gave up, even with the enmity that they showed towards him. He says then after that وهذه سنته. So وتركنا عليه في الآخرين. Whether it's يذكر بخير, as Ibn Abbas رضي الله عنهما, he said, to be mentioned with good. Mujahid, he says يعني لسان صدق للأنبياء كلهم. That means the speech of truthfulness to all of the messengers after him. They all mentioned Nuh alayhi salam with matters of goodness, which is praising him as we mentioned. Then he says وهذه سنته تعالى في المحسنين. Now after mentioning this وتركنا عليه في الآخرين, this is the sunnah of Allah for all of the muhsin, for all of the good doers, those who have this sincerity with the ihsan, that they worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if they see Allah. They're not paying attention to al-khalq. They're not attached to the creation of Allah in their actions. They're looking into the heavens with their hearts. They're seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. They worship Allah as if they see Allah. And if they don't see Allah, they know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeing them. Someone in that type of level of presence, would he pay attention to the khalq, to the makhluk? There is no way. So this is the highest level, أعلى مراتب الدين, the highest level of the deen. So when someone is like this, read about al-ihsan, of course, in the Quran. So the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the muhsineen, that they're always going to be praised by the believers, by the good ones. أن ينشر لهم من الثناء على حسب إحسانه. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will spread the thana and the praise for them according to their ihsan, in which they never sought that, because they only sought the praise worthy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure alone. But it's by the mercy of Allah that He after them, or so that they would praise them. So وَجَعَلْنَا ذُرِّيَّتَهُ هُمُ الْبَاقِينَ وَتَرَكْنَا عَلَيْهِ فِي الْآخِرِينَ سَلَامٌ عَلَى نُوحٍ في العالمين. Salam. And this is also part of what's meaning of وَتَرَكْنَا عَلَيْهِ في الآخِرِينَ. That peace, and this is as a noun, سلام على نوح, that at all times continuously في العالمين, in the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is a great favor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon Nuh, the nations after Nuh alayhi salam. So he says ودل قوله إنه. Why did he mention the ihsan? Because it says إِنَّ كَذَلِكَ نَجِزِ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. This is how we recompense al-jaza to al-muhsinin. So it's mentioned now in general. So that's why he says, and this is sunnatullah till the day of judgment. Because he did not say that only Nuh alayhi salam, no, inna kadhalik. This is how najizi, we reward, we recompense al-muhsinin. And he mentioned al-ihsan as the characteristics, and not just Nuh alayhi salam. So if it says inna kadhalika najzi Nuh, that's Nuh alayhi salam. And of course the context means Nuh. But when the sifa is mentioned, that means anyone that applies the sifa, he get the like of the rewards. And if he gets some of it, he gets some. And so on. Inna kadhalika najzi al-muhsinin, innahu min ibadina al-mu'minin. Indeed, he is from our ibad that are believers. So believers are muhsinin, of course. And the belief is what initiated all of this, and the level of al-ihsan in their worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in their dealing with al-khalq. Then ثم أغرقنا الآخرين, then everyone else drowned. But in the tafsir he says here, which is أن الإيمان, when he says إن كذلك نجزي المحسنين إنه من عبادنا المؤمنين, indeed he is from our believing slaves. He says أن الإيمان أرفع منازل العباد. This is the last statement, inshallah. أن الإيمان أرفع منازل العباد. الإيمان is the highest levels of the عباد of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وأنه مشتمل على جميع شرائع الدين وأصوله وفروعه. Because it includes in it all of the shara'i of the deen, all the matters of the deen and its foundation and its branches. لأن الله مدح به خواص خلقه. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised the special of His creation. And this is with it mentioned like this, that means al-ihsan is mentioned, or al-ihsan can be referring to the people, and al-iman refers to the entire iman that includes al-ihsan. So إن كذلك نجزي المحسنين إنه من عبادنا المؤمنين ثم أغرقنا الآخرين, then the rest were drowned. You see ثم أغرقنا الآخرين without, they're not that important, they're nothing whatsoever, even though they thought themselves to be anything, but they are nothing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and because they did not have the ta'zeem of Allah and disbelieved in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we'll stop here inshallah ta'ala. And we continue inshallah ta'ala next time, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us benefit from what we heard. Well, first of all, the attendance code is وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ وَأَهْلَهُ. وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ وَأَهْلَهُ. We saved him and his family. Anything else? طيب جزاكم الله خير. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.